countries in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has signed a presidential decree convening the electoral body for the holding of an early presidential election on September 7, 2024. The number of fatalities in the horrific massacre committed this morning by the Israeli occupation forces in the Nusayrat refugee camp has risen to approximately 80, with dozens of more injured, mostly civilians. The UN Agency for Palestine Refugees UNRWA has called for conducting investigations into all violations against the United Nations, including attack on their buildings in Gaza. The African Union has strongly condemned a massacre in a Sudanese village in which at least 150 civilians, including around 35 children, were indiscriminately killed. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has signed a presidential decree convening the electoral body for the holding of an early presidential election on Saturday, September 7, 2024. In line with the Constitution, in particular Articles 85 and 91, paragraphs 7, 10 and 11, and Articles 62, paragraph 2 and 246 of Order 2101 of March 10, 2021, establishing the organic law relating to electoral law, amended and modified, the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, signed Presidential Decree 2482 of June 8, 2024, summoning the electoral body for the holding of an early presidential election on Saturday, September 7, 2024. The same presidential decree sets the start of the exceptional revision of the electoral list on Wednesday, June 12, 2024, and its closing on Thursday, June 27, 2024. In this line, the Elections National Independent Authority will start receiving the application of those willing to run for presidential elections as of tomorrow. Algeria has been elected by 185 votes out of 190 countries that took part in the vote to the post of Vice President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Asia Bikar has more.
Algeria, through its permanent representative at the UN, Mr. Ammar Benjama, will be representing the African group alongside its peers elected from the other regional groups in the position of vice chairman. Algeria will have to contribute to leading and directing the work of the plenary sessions of the UN General Assembly from September 2024 to September 2025. Among the highlights of the 79th session of the UN General Assembly will be the future summit, which will mark the work of the high-level segment of the session in September 2024. This appointment also comes at a time when Africa is facing significant challenges, such as the completion of decolonization, the fight against poverty, sustainable development, and food security. Guided by the orientations of the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, the Algerian diplomacy will commit itself to contributing to the multilateral effort aimed at confronting these fundamental issues and promoting lasting and equitable solutions to the many and multifaceted challenges facing the international community. Algeria's diplomatic efforts in the General Assembly following the election will be combined with its tireless efforts as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council for the 2024-2025 period. This dual representation in two of the United Nations' most influential and decision-making bodies bears witness to Algeria's undeniable rise on the international stage and its unwavering commitment to promoting international peace and security.
Algeria has been elected with a very large majority of 185 votes out of 190 countries having participated in the vote as a member of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, for a term of 3 years from January 1, 2025 to December 31, 2027. More details in this report by Majid Mila.
With the election, which took place on June 7, 2024 in New York during the session of the United Nations General Assembly, Algeria becomes the UN member of the main body for the 8th time in its history. The brilliant election reflects the trust that Algeria enjoys within the UN and marks proven recognition of its ability to bring expertise and commitment necessary for the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 horizon. Algeria is thus further consolidating its presence within the most influential bodies of the United Nations. Through the election, Algerian diplomacy and in application of the directives of the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, will aim to contribute significantly to the development of innovative political recommendations likely to accelerate the achievement of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as strengthening development, which is the essential path to closing disparities within and between nations in close collaboration with other ECOSOC stakeholders. Algeria sets for itself objectives of high importance during its mandate in the Council, including strengthening international solidarity, contributing to social and economic development, facing the challenges linked to foreign occupation, and the application of self-determination principle, contributions to international and regional funds dedicated to financing development activities or humanitarian aid, as well as encouraging flows of foreign direct investment. Algeria remains determined to multilateral cooperation and global development and to promote the fundamental values at the heart of the United Nations peace, development and human rights mission. The Economic and Social Council is one of the principal bodies of the United Nations and is considered the main platform for discussing economic, social, cultural, health, human rights, women and youth. It is also responsible for coordinating the activities of relevant bodies, agencies and programs of the United Nations.
The number of fatalities in the horrific massacre committed this morning by the Israeli occupation forces in the Nusayra refugee camp located in central Gaza has risen to approximately 80, with dozens more injured, mostly civilians, according to medical reports. Health authorities said nearly 80 citizens, the majority of whom were children and women, were killed and others injured due to the intense bombardment by Israeli forces from land, sea and air on the camp. This unprecedented aggression targeted the central governorate of Gaza, particularly in the Nusayra refugee camp, for over 2 hours. The Israeli airstrike also targeted the vicinity of Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir el-Balah, as well as other locations in Al-Maghazi and Burayt refugee camp and the town of Zawadna, all located in central Gaza. The Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs and Expatriate has hailed the United Nations decision to include the Israeli occupation on the list of shame on violations of children's rights, seeing it as a step in the right direction to hold the occupation accountable for its crimes in the Palestinian territories, notably in Gaza. Asya Bekkar has more details in this report.
The Palestinian Foreign Ministry said that the lack of international accountability towards the occupier encouraged it to maintain in perpetrating more violations and crimes against Palestinians, including the systematic and widespread targeting of children. It stressed that the time came for international community to unite its efforts to ensure the protection of Palestinian children and put an end to their deliberate targeting by the occupation. It added that raising the voice of international justice, putting an end to double standards in the application of international law and resolutions of legitimacy, putting an end to the crime of genocide committed by the occupation in Gaza, realizing the aspirations of the Palestinian people to freedom, independence and self-determination, and embodying their independent state with Al-Quds as capital is the only way to enable Palestinian children to live in safety and peace on their land. The ministry called on all countries to assume their responsibilities, review their relations with the Israeli occupation and exert real pressure on it to put an end to its aggression against the Gaza Strip and its attacks on the West Bank, particularly in occupied Al-Quds. Regarding human rights violation against children in Palestine, UNICEF Communication Chief Mr. Jonathan Cricks had the following.
Every child must be protected. This is according to international humanitarian law. It is a grave violation to have children killed or maimed in the context of a conflict, and we have been calling on all parties to ensure that, everyone is making everything possible to protect the children from being killed, from being injured, from losing their houses, from not accessing the hospitals. All these are grave violations, and clearly we are very, very concerned about the situation in the past 8 months, but also in the past weeks, when we see that we had many children, probably 500,000 children who had to move from Rafah to Deir el-Balah, to Al-Mawasi, to live in extremely dire conditions.
That was the UNICEF Communication Chief, Mr. Jonathan Criggs.
The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, has called for conducting investigations into all violations against the United Nations, including attacks on their buildings in Gaza. Majid Millet has the details.
UNRWA's communications director, Juliette Thomas, said in a statement to the Washington Post that more than 170 UNRWA buildings, mostly schools that were turned into shelters, have been attacked since October 7. More than 450 people have been killed in those attacks. Earlier, the UNRWA Commissioner Philippe Lazzarini declared that war of misinformation will still rages against the agency, and it endangers the lives of many colleagues in Gaza and elsewhere. The United Nations official added that United Nations employees had been killed in Gaza and at unprecedented levels, emphasizing that the time has come for independent investigations and for accountability. He concluded by saying that it was high time to support the heroic Palestinian journalists by allowing their international colleagues to enter Gaza so that independent, realistic and brave media reports continue. Let's recall that one of UNRWA schools in the Nusayrat area in central Gaza was hit 2 days by the Israeli occupation. The UNRWA said the school was possibly hit several times, and the number of those reported killed is between 35 and 45.
Algeria International, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, has strongly denounced the brutal Israeli massacre against UNRWA school housing displaced Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, which resulted in the killing of at least 40 civilians and the wounding of several others, the majority of whom are women and children. The OIC said in a statement that it considered this an extension of the ongoing crime of genocide in the Gaza Strip and a flagrant violation of the provisions of international humanitarian law, the Geneva Convention and relevant United Nations resolutions, as well as orders issued by the International Court of Justice. The organization also welcomed the decision of the Secretary General of the United Nations to include Israel, the occupying power, on the list of violators of children's rights in armed conflicts, or the so-called list of shame. The Regional Director of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, for the Middle East and North Africa, Adel Khodr, has affirmed that the Gaza children have been living for 8 months in a nightmare of continuous Zionist army attacks, which have caused incredible destruction. Mr. Khodr wrote in a message posted on her X account that in the last 10 days alone they have seen images of children being burned in different areas of Rafah, including the horrific attack that took place overnight on a school housing civilians in the Nusayrat camps. In Sudan, the African Union has strongly condemned a massacre in a Sudanese village in which at least 150 civilians, including around 35 children, were indiscriminately killed. African Union Commission Chief Musa Faki Mohammed said he was alarmed by the situation in Sudan continued to deteriorate, leading to acute hunger and even famine in parts of the country. And now the Counter-Terrorism Committee, CTC, has held an open briefing on the criminalization of terrorist offensive, of strengthening of international cooperation in bringing terrorists to justice. The opening briefing brought together representatives from member states of international organizations as well as civil society to explore how international cooperation on bringing terrorists to justice in accordance with Resolution 1373 and other resolutions can be enhanced through reliance on clear and precise legislations that criminalize terrorist acts. Algeria's representative to the UN, Ammar Benjameh, said an effective counter-terrorism cannot be achieved without addressing the root causes of terrorism.
Apart from the humility and humanity with which we should be approaching this question, apart from that, I recommend that you bear in mind the specific context of a terrorist act, which is to be condemned, prosecuted, punished. But if we want it not to happen again, it is crucial that we look at the causes, creating this feeling of despair. I think that I have said enough. I have opened my heart to you and told you what I truly think about our approach. Seeking to define terrorism is something that we have tried to do and failed to do for 40 years, and we will not succeed in that enterprise in the next few decades either, unless we seriously and humbly and humanely tackle and look at root causes of terrorist acts.
The meeting was also an opportunity to examine the relationship between well-codified criminal offences and international cooperation, to highlight why one is an important precondition for the other. 2:46 Algiers time, you're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Today on the waves of Radio Algeria International, we are honoured to have UNICEF Communication Chief Mr. Jonathan Creeks to speak about the International Day of Innocent Children, Victims of Aggression, shedding light on the situation of children in Palestine. Hi, Mr. Creeks.
Hi, good morning.
A few months ago, you reported that at least 17,000 children are unaccompanied or separated due to the ongoing assault on the Gaza Strip. Can you provide an overview of the current situation of children in Palestine?
Well, these figures of 17,000 is not something that was monitored directly on the ground. It's actually an estimate. And that estimate is based on UNICEF expertise and experience in other conflicts similar to the one that we're witnessing in the Gaza Strip. And the estimate is usually based on the fact that, according to UNICEF, 1% of the overall estimated displaced population, 1% of that population is unaccompanied or separated children. And considering that the overall estimated displaced population is 1.7 million, that makes 17,000 children. But beyond the figures, when I was in the Gaza Strip, I met many, many children who had lost a brother, a sister, sometimes one parent, and unfortunately also their two parents, and they were usually taken care of by their aunts, their uncles, their cousins. But the trauma, the impact of this conflict on those children is, of course, huge and absolutely dramatic.
And how has the conflict impacted the daily lives of Palestinian children?
I mean, in all aspects, their daily lives has been impacted. Most of the children living currently in the Gaza Strip have been displaced not only once, but 2, 3, 4, 5 times. We have seen major population movement from the north to the center, and then from the center to the south, and now again from the south to the center again. And you know, when those families are moving, when I see those families, they are living in makeshift tents. They only have like a couple of mattresses, a plate, a knife, and a fork, but they barely have anything. They move with what they have on their back, meaning that they went through the entire winter with not the right clothing. They don't have access to enough food. They don't have access to enough water. They don't have access to enough medical supplies. And in addition to that, they have been subject to a very high level of violence and bombardments. So they have been tremendously psychologically impacted. And here, after having said that, we didn't even enter the fact that more than 600,000 students didn't attend 1 hour at school since October 2023. So I can really say that this conflict has affected almost all children in the Gaza Strip in every aspect of their lives.
You just mentioned the psychological effects, so my next question is, what are some of the most common psychological effects experienced by Palestinian children due to the ongoing conflict? And can you share maybe some examples of how physical violence and aggression have affected children